You're about to watch my debate with Tucker Carlson at Politicon 2018. If you want to support the home of progressives, TYT, become a member today by clicking the link in the description box below.
Now what we're looking at, and this is what drives me maybe craziest, is a landscape totally transformed by technology, by automation. This is not secret knowledge. Look it up. One of the reasons that people are so powerless they felt they had to vote for Donald Trump is because the value of labor is in steep decline. Immigration's part of it. Technology, I would argue, is probably even a bigger part of it. Huge sectors of the entire economy are about to be replaced by machines. This will mean massive internal displacement of workers who will have even less power than they do now. Into that, you're throwing a huge number of new people. And my only question is, okay, what are they going to do in a world where a lot of the jobs now occupied by people will be occupied by machines? And the answer I get is, shut up, racist. Okay, fine. That's not actually an answer. And we have an obligation, I think, if those in my business, try to convince people or whatever, to raise the question. And I can't get anybody on either side to take it seriously at all. And that's when I begin to conclude that they're totally reckless. They don't know what they're doing, almost any of them. They're lying about it. And they're wrecking the country because that is a very obvious chain of events that's going to take place. And nobody says it.
But so one more follow-up there, at least, Tucker. So, look, in terms of do we need the immigrants now and what cycle are we in history in America? Well, a couple of southern states did some raids, took away some undocumented immigrants, and then they panicked because nobody came and took the jobs, whether it was farming or warehouses and factories, et cetera. And so then they had to change the law and say, okay, never mind, they can come back in. So that happened a couple of years ago, and we've seen that. So obviously, and there's actually a great number of examples of that in the country, obviously there is some need for those workers. So when I see those Latin American workers that have come in, I see the same faces as the Irish and the Italians and the Jews and all the others that came in very poor, but that made this country much, much richer in the end. And so Tucker, when you say the word demographics, I think that is what makes people go, what does that mean? And so I genuinely want to ask you about that. So you did a story about Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and you were worried that the demographics of that town was changing. Why? Why are you worried about it?
Because change is really hard. And I'll address the first part, I think, more interesting part of what you just said in just a second. But to the demographic question, let me just say out front, I don't ever speak in dog whistles because I can say whatever I want, and I always do. So I appreciate the question, because I'm often attacked on the basis of, maybe something, and it's probably my fault for not explaining whatever it was fully, but let me just say, nothing is in code, okay? It's all right out there. And my core concern is change and the pace of change, because I don't think that people are hardwired for it. And so you have a group, Homo sapiens, that have lived a certain way for only 10,000 years, not a big deal. Hand-to-mouth agrarian society, boom, the machine age happens with the invention of the steam engine, something totally different, causes massive displacement, revolutions around the world. Half the world is enslaved by communism for 70 years in reaction to it. And you kind of catch your breath, and then you have this thing called the digital revolution, which totally changes everything again. And so one of my maybe my overriding concern after the wage question is how much change can people handle, actually, before they go crazy? And there's a lot of study on this. Robert Putnam at Harvard, who's hardly a right-winger, the bowling alone guy, has done a lot of really interesting study on this. Again, he's a liberal, but an honest one. And he's like, people, when they feel threatened, when things have changed too much, they get really angry and tribal, and they don't trust other people, and civic institutions collapse. And we're seeing this across the country. So there's a huge cost to changing everything up for the benefit of the few. And let me tie that to the first part of your question, which was, you said, in the South, there were raids on chicken plants, Tyson chicken plants. And the INS or ICE or whatever we're calling it now comes in and says, these people are here illegally without documentation. We're enforcing the law for once. And they couldn't find labor. Well, who is they? Well, they is the chicken plants. They is the employer, okay? And they couldn't find labor because they didn't want to pay market rates to Americans. So basically what they're saying is, even though we're in the United States, we're a company in the United States. And by the way, you can say this of Amazon and Walmart for sure, and McDonald's and lots of other big corporations that the right has defended for many years, unfortunately, and now the left defends, bizarrely, they benefit from all the institutions that make business possible, the rule of law, patents, like all the things that we have that other people don't have, okay? And yet they feel like paying the wages of Tegucigalpa. Because why wouldn't they? They're an employer. What bothers me is that no one ever calls them out on it. So like you often hear people say, well, who's going to pick the lettuce or whatever? And I'm not slagging lettuce pickers. I respect anybody who works with his hands in the sun, of course. But it's not about the picker. It's about his employer. So lettuce might cost, $4 a head. Okay. Well, an iPhone cost $1,000 because like actually things have cost because they have value, because labor has value. Duh. So I guess my question is, when did liberals all become libertarian economists who are lecturing me about the market and how one thing we can't do is get in the way of employers finding the cheapest possible labor? What? When did you start defending this? And the answer, of course, is that big companies figured out the game. And they're like, for a very small price, we can buy the allegiance of the Democratic Party. All we have to do is fund their nonprofits, which they do, but more importantly, make a series of totally hollow symbolic gestures, like here's some new bathrooms. I'm for Black Lives Matter. Leave me alone. And they have totally convinced your average college student that they're the cutting edge of the progressive movement. And so you see this really weird thing that always blows my mind. You go into an Apple store, and shamefully, I own Apple products, and you'll walk in and there'll be like some highly educated, kid with 2 degrees from impressive schools with a nose ring, standing in this kind of sad, spare retail space wearing a matching uniform, thinking he's part of the revolution. And I'm like, dude, you're working for the richest man in the world. Like, you're just a cog in a machine. You're a tool, actually. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm picking up, yeah, whatever. But I always think, like, the level of delusion that they've pulled off convincing the left, like, don't criticize suicides at Foxconn factories because, hey, we got you on the dumb social issues that don't mean anything. And they fall for it. It's hilarious.